to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will call this meeting of the Milton Planning Commission to order. It's about, let's call it 7 o'clock. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm George Ragsdale. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan and plan map, and other related plans and amendments to the zoning ordinance. The members of the commission, from my left, Commissioner Fred Edwards, Commissioner Paul Moore, Commissioner Gary Burchett, Chris Doty, Ed Bittner, and Joe Kramer. Did I say Fred? I'm sorry, Mark.
Yes.
Sorry, Mark. It's been a long time since I've been up here. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I want to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for conducting the meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will also be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position, and if time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is on the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks, again, provided that there's time remaining within the allotted 10 minutes. The staff of the Community Development Department will be keeping track of time and will inform all of us periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Each speaker should fill out a speaker card before speaking. They're over on the counter over there, and leave it with staff before you come up to speak. All speakers, we would ask, identify themselves by name, address, and if you're speaking on behalf of an organization, identify the organization as well. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of a rezoning action being opposed, any campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to any local government official of the local government that's going to consider the application, it's the duty of that opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of that statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you've contributed more than $250 or more to a council member and you've not filed a disclosure prior to tonight's meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests you have someone else speak and represent your point of view. Each application has been properly filed with the Department of Community Development. Signs have been posted on each site. Matters have been advertised, and notices have been mailed to property owners affected by the zoning as required by the ordinance. The Planning Commission's recommendations will be forwarded to the City Council for final disposition. The next City Council meeting to consider these actions tonight will be held approximately 3.5 weeks from this hearing on the third Monday of the month at 6 p.m. in Council Chambers. The Community Development Department has also reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, internal and external to the city, and their recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, and those have also been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Demonstrations of any sort within the chamber are prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, dialogue with any person speaking, or outbursts. Please turn off all cell phones or place them on silent. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission. Please show the same respect to the person speaking you would expect to receive yourself. In addition, if you have any material you want to submit to the Planning Commission during the meeting, unless requested to do so by the Commission, all material should be submitted through the Community Development Department. Finally, if your petition is deferred in accordance with the zoning ordinance, you're required to update or obtain a new sign for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in further delay, and there are no exceptions. We will start the meeting with public comment. This is the time in the meeting when anyone who's here that would like to speak on behalf or on an issue that's not on the agenda should come forward at this time. If you're here to speak on one of the agenda items, you can wait until that agenda item is called. Is there anyone here that would like to offer any comments? Come on forward. Have you filled out a speaker card?
No.
You need to fill out a speaker card if you would. We'll wait for you. Go ahead and.
Is this on the Milton store or on the?
Correct.
Okay, so,
So you
Yeah.
want to speak about something else?
yes.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and.
Go ahead
speak
and-
while
go
we do
ahead
the card, and then-
You can fill it out
Yeah,
afterwards.
I'll speak about that too, but I'll wait till we get to that portion.
Okay.
My name is Jody Martin. I'm a property owner at 15350 Thompson Road. I sit directly across from Bell Park and have view of the new store directly from my property. As I said, I'll talk about the store when we come to that point in the meeting this evening. The two other issues that I wanted to address are the expansion of Bell Park and the traffic items under consideration for the Hopewell, Thompson, Birmingham Road intersections. I understand there are traffic circles being considered for those areas. I would like to know when meetings and/or when homeowners are going to be advised of what the different committees for planning are considering. We have had extensive conversations about the park. The gentleman has been around to the homeowners, and that was much appreciated. He took time out of his day to come and meet with each of us individually, and in addition held a neighborhood meeting. So we feel pretty informed about that, although I don't know what entirely the plans are for further expansion of the park beyond the properties that have already been closed down within the last 30 to 60 days. In other words, I don't know if you're looking at the fronting properties on Thompson that are on the opposite corners of Bell Park Drive, and what beyond that as well. So there's a lot going on in that intersection right now. The historic designation is one. We're certainly concerned about that property going commercial at some point in the future. But that, coupled with a traffic circle at that intersection and Bell Park expansion, doesn't do a whole lot for me as a property owner because it's all on my doorstep. And I moved to that area because I liked that it was agricultural. I have horses on the property. I'm CUVA designated. And so I'm not interested in seeing it overdevelop in such a short period of time.
Sure. Okay.
Okay?
All I would tell you is that for this body, we can't do a whole lot about responding to your request. I would encourage you to attend the council meeting and raise those questions. Kathy, do you or Robin or Michelle have any knowledge of when the public comment period's gonna be on any proposed traffic
Which
changes?
intersection were we talking about? Just the
Thompson and
It's,
Hopewell.
well, Thompson jogs.
Right.
So it's the Thompson,
Hopewell.
what I'll call east and west jog as it intersects Hopewell Road. And my understanding is also what's under consideration is where Hopewell and Birmingham Road intersect.
Right.
Yeah, that's the more immediate one, the one at Birmingham and Hopewell. And there was a public session, I think it was last Monday or the Monday before.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was
Yeah, they
out of
was,
country,
It was
so.
a public hearing. And
2
they had
Mondays
all of
ago.
the Public Works Department was here to answer any questions and so on. But you can still meet with Public Works and.
Get
And I think-
information
and I think
on
it's
that.
on,
Information.
it's on the
It's
website
online.
as well. There are two options.
Mhm.
One is a traffic light.
Right.
We're talking Birmingham and Hopewell now.
Yeah.
Right,
One is a traffic light and the other is a roundabout.
right.
And that was what, the public hearing was about,
Mhm.
as well as the presentation to the city council.
Okay. Yeah, and unfortunately, I have to travel for my work, so I was literally out of country when that meeting took place. But we've tried to attend all the meetings when I've not been traveling for work here.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
Thompson.
really called Carter Lucas, who's the
Cart-
director of public
Birmingham.
works.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
for
And,
sure.
and I believe public comment is still being received, so.
Yeah, public comment is still being received and it should be on the website, all of the alternatives as well as the meeting
Okay.
for it.
I'm not aware of anything being planned at this point for Hopewell and Thompson.
Correct.
I don't think, there's
Yeah.
nothing that's
This.
approved, because they've made comments for the subject rezoning, and there was no,
Right.
conditions based on anything in the future being changed with that intersection.
Okay.
That we're talking about tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, and in terms of Bell Park, that is really, it's the Park and Recreation Department.
And like I said, the gentleman,
Jim Craig is the
Jim
gentleman.
Thanks, Louis,
That's
thank
right.
you.
He's the Park and Rec Director.
and he's the gentleman that came out.
Yes, and
So-
so he's real, even though we're the planning group, he is doing the park planning.
Right.
And I believe there was a contract, the city council approved this the other day, to hire a landscape architect who's gonna help develop those plans.
That's right.
And there'll be plenty of public participation along the way as it goes, so the public will now be excluded from the plans. Right, and in terms of any other future acquisitions, that I'm not aware of, but,
And nor was he at the time we spoke with him.
yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Just a point of clarification, sorry, the property, from what I understand, the
Yeah.
property,
You need to introduce yourself.
oh, I'm sorry. Bill Shellhorn, 225 Orchard Bend Trail, Milton, Georgia. The properties that were acquired by the city for the park development were purchased without any public comment or any, any kind of a meeting. And Joe Lockwood told me the reason for that was because there was no zoning change, so there was no required meeting or public meeting or notification, which, even so, I mean, obviously there's plans for great change. So the spirit of what's taking place there should have been, in my opinion, part of, there should have been some public comment about all of that. And I think when you look at that intersection, and you look at potentially putting commercial property with ballparks, I mean, the writing's on the wall that's the next intersection that's gonna get traffic lights or a roundabout, and so I think that's where these questions are coming from. That's just some additional information that I got from
You're
Joe.
talking about the intersection of Thompson and Hopewell, is that what you're
Correct,
referring to?
yes.
Okay.
So anyway, that
Well,
was all.
Land acquisitions, like personnel matters, are done in executive session. They're not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not subject to public meetings. I mean, how they use the land after that is a different issue, but the acquisition itself is generally done in executive session because they don't want to disclose publicly what their plans are in order to try and protect the negotiation of the price on the property.
Mhm.
Isn't there a,
Well, a couple of interesting points, if you don't, I'm sorry, but they actually paid about 60% more than what the property was appraised by Fulton County for. So that, to me, I was scratching my head about why we would pay so much more for property, number one. Number two, the people in the area, regardless of whether there was a closed or backdoor meeting on this, would probably want to know that all this property is being sold out from under them and that the use of that property is going to change drastically. So, sorry, Paul, didn't mean to interrupt you.
that's okay. I think, correct me, Kathleen, isn't there there's a reading, there's a reading into the minutes of a meeting prior to a purchase, but there's no public discussion of it.
But I think the acquisition is tied back to the Park and Recreation Plan,
Mm-hmm.
which I believe called for an expansion of Bell Park.
Right.
So I think that's when the public participation process.
Yeah, the citizens are correct, there's not a discussion per se in public prior to the
Right.
acquisition, other than, to your point,
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other public comments, questions? We need a motion to close
I
public.
move we close public comment.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm sorry,
Unanimous.
who seconded it?
You're out.
Fair.
Okay, next is the approval of the action minutes from the September 25th meeting. They were distributed electronically. Everybody should have them. Are there any changes?
I have a
Proposed?
question I'd
Sure.
like to pose to staff. When we approved the definition, I was concerned when I read the paper's interpretation of what we approved. And in the Milton Herald, it discussed the approval as a zoo. And it's obviously a misinterpretation of what we approved. I don't recall anything. Actually, what I do recall is we actually discussed the fact that it was not going to be a zoo. It was going to be for some educational opportunity,
Exhibit.
but not like a open to the public zoo. Paper was wrong, basically, as it were. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think zoo is the incorrect terminology, but I
Yeah.
mean, obviously there can potentially be public coming to look at the exhibits,
Right.
so.
Yeah, I think it's just, one is very different than the other. I think, a prearranged stop-in by the member of the community, or even just a stop-in for that matter, is very different than something that's publicized as a zoo. So, okay.
The only other point, George, since you were absent, shouldn't that signing be from George instead of you?
I don't remember what we've ever done about that.
Well, I mean, it's gonna be approved.
It's tonight's
tonight
meeting
here.
I don't think it matters, I don't think it
Doesn't
matters
matter?
who signs them.
Okay.
I mean, I can't vote, but I don't think it matters who
Oh,
signs
okay.
them.
Who signs it?
Yeah.
It's all right.
Are there any changes needed? I know Paul weighed in and said there were none. Are there any other changes needed? Then we need a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. I do have a question, kind of a follow-up to Paul's. One thing I would appreciate, and only in this case, because I wasn't, not only in this case because I wasn't here, but especially in this case because I wasn't here, when those things were approved with changes, I'd appreciate seeing what those changes were that were approved, because I have no idea from the minutes. All I know is that something got approved.
Okay, I mean, it's on Granicus, but if you want all changes to be reflected all the time.
No, I'm just saying,
Right,
getting the text, because whatever those changes were that have been recommended is what's gonna go forward to council, right?
it already did, yeah.
You know, that's what I'm saying, so all I was saying is I'd like to be able to see
See, you wanna
those.
see the
Yeah.
red lines,
Okay, Robin, you wanna call the first item?
Yeah, the first item is RZ 12-15, 15260 Hopewell Road by Randy Clark LLC to rezone from AG1 agricultural to H Historic District for the existing building to be utilized as a country store on .5240 acre.
Okay, this is a site map showing the proposed site at the southwest intersection of Hopewell and Thompson. The subject site contains .5240 acres. It also contains a vacant 1,179 square foot structure formerly used as a country store. The applicant seeks a rezoning to the H Historic District for a country store. This slide shows the existing zoning for the area, which is all zoned AG. AG1. 2030 comprehensive plan shows this area to be used essentially for agriculture, equestrian, and estate residential use. And you do see the fire station to the west, and then the park to the southeast. The site plan was submitted to us on September 4th, 2012, and as you look at the site plan, you'll see that the shaded area is not under consideration, just the unshaded area, which is directly on the corner of Thompson Road and Hopewell, and which does contain that structure of 1,100 plus square feet. In terms of background, on August 20th, 2012, the mayor and city council designated the subject building as historic. This requirement must be met prior to a request to rezone to the H district. Additionally, section 64-953C states, the proposed historic use shall be limited to those historic structures identified on the subject property and may not be expanded. Therefore, if this request is approved, a condition will be provided listing uses to be excluded based on the previous historic use of the structure. In regard to site plan analysis, pursuant to section 64-954, development standards for the H district states the following. In order to allow for the unique nature of the properties receiving the H district classification, there are no district-specific development standards. However, all other requirements of the subject properties overlay district and the City of Milton zoning ordinance, including but not limited to those identified in section 64-955, shall be maintained. In addition, the Milton City Council shall consider the subject properties overlay district and City of Milton zoning ordinance as it pertains to the proposed historic use and may adopt reasonable conditions of zoning with respect to the following without the need for a variance. For the following sections, the applicant and staff are requesting the following conditions for the subject site. Section 1141 subsection 3A. Reduce the 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback to a 10-foot landscape strip along the south property line of the property intersecting with Hopewell Road. Section 64-1141, subsection 3A. Reduce the 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback to a minimum 40-foot buffer along the south line of the property parallel to Thompson Road. Section 64-1141, subsection 3A, to delete the 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the southwest property line of the property running from Hopewell Road north 68 degrees, 10 minutes, 12 seconds, west 89, 69 feet, and north 21 degrees, 34 minutes, 48 seconds, west 35.46 feet to the northerly line of an existing driveway for out parcel 2. Section 64-1433, subsection F1, to reduce the 25-foot setback for parking adjacent to residential use property to 10 feet along the south property line. Staff notes that this zoning reference is to the C1 Community Business District. There currently is not a similar requirement for the H District, but this will be included in the conditions of zoning. Section 64-64-1145, subsection 6C, to allow on-site parking located to the front of a building or between a building and the public right-of-way, which is Hopewell Road. These items will be included in the recommended conditions. Signage. The applicant is also requested to permit signage in keeping with the historic designation of the store building. These include projecting signage and wall sign logos as seen in the photographs within the letter of intent dated September 4th, 2012. Before installation of any signage, the owner must first obtain a certificate of appropriateness under Article 18 of the Milton zoning ordinance. A condition of zoning will be included to reflect this request. And then you see the example of the signs that they will be requesting for this property. Parking requirements. The site plan submitted indicates a total of 6 parking spaces, of which 1 is handicap accessible, located in the front of the building. The existing structure proposed for retail use is 1,179 square feet. Pursuant to section 64-1410, calculations of 4 spaces per 1,000 feet are required. Based on this calculation, a total of 5 spaces are required. Environmental site analysis. The environmental site analysis report is sufficient and satisfies the requirement of section 64-2126. And I'll just summarize it to say that the field survey was conducted to verify the areas addressed in the ESA report. There are no wetlands, floodplains, streams, etc. The building was designated historic on August 20, 2012. And the staff also notes that in the past, the building has operated as a general store with gas pumps. According to the applicant, however, the tanks were removed prior to the purchase of the property. In terms of public involvement, the DRB reviewed this on October 1st, 2012. They expressed concern for parking in front of the building. They asked us to check the site distance. They felt that signage should be historic in nature, and they were all for making the building look historic as well. It was a CZIM meeting held on September 26, 2012. There were 5 members of the community in attendance. All of the community members lived close to the property and had concerns regarding traffic, more intensive commercial use of the property over time, and commercial spot zoning. Staff has not received any correspondence regarding this development. There was a public participation meeting held at the applicant's Wynwood Parkway office on October 25th, 2012. There was 1 citizen in attendance. The following were his concerns: traffic control in the area due to the existing configuration of the intersection and 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. That drivers currently drive across the property to cut the corner, and also there was concern expressed over the use of the property and impact on the area. Standards of review. It has been determined that the proposed general store will be suitable in view of the use and development of adjacent and nearby property. The site fronts on 2 roads to the north and the east. To the south, a single-family residence is located in the same parcel. The residentially used property to the west is located approximately 300 feet from the subject property with a 50-foot undisturbed buffer adjacent to it. The proposal will not adversely affect existing use or usability of the adjacent properties as described above, if approved with the recommended conditions. The subject site may not have a reasonable use as currently zoned AG1 agricultural based on the small size of the building and its location at the intersection of two streets. Staff does not anticipate a significant impact on existing streets, transportation facilities, utilities, or schools as proposed if the required site improvements listed in the recommended conditions are made to the site. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the following comprehensive plan policy if developed with the recommended conditions. That, one of the policies says that we will expand the identification, documentation, and protection of historic, cultural, and archaeological resources in the city, and when possible, encourage access by the public. The proposed H-District structure will be utilized as a country store, and that type of use is not consistent with agricultural, equestrian, and estate residential. But the purpose of the H-Historic District is intended to allow for a historic structure to be used, protected, renovated, and preserved on its historic value to the community. It may allow a specific previous use to continue in a structure where that use would be considered non-conforming as defined in the current City of Milton zoning ordinance. This designation will help preserve the rich traditions of history and culture evident in Milton's original settlement. Therefore, staff supports the approval of this request to rezone from AG1 agricultural to the H District. The proposed use will not be environmentally averse to the natural resources, environment, and citizens of the city due to the required development regulations. Recommended conditions. If the Planning Commission chooses to approve the petition, the specific conditions are: if this petition is approved by the mayor and city council, it should be H-District conditional, subject to the owner's agreement to the following enumerated conditions. Where these conditions conflict with the stipulations and offerings contained in the letter of intent, these conditions shall supersede unless specifically stipulated by the mayor and city council. Recommended conditions. 1, to the owner's agreement to restrict the use of the subject property as follows. 2, a country store and associated accessory uses on a .5240 acre lot, including the existing 1,179 square foot structure, and allowing only those uses that are specific to the previous historic use, i.e. sale of grocery staples, hardware, seed and feed, and sundry item, homemade sandwiches, coffee, non-alcoholic beverages, and lunch items. Also permitted are seasonal items such as pumpkins, hay bales, pine straw, wreaths, and Christmas trees. The following uses shall be excluded: garage, automobile repair or automotive specialty shop, convenience store, gas station, landscaping business or garden center, financial establishment, freestanding fast food restaurant, drive-through, commercial amusements, liquor sales and package stores, motels, hotels, adult-oriented entertainment businesses including adult bookstores, adult entertainment or adult entertainment establishments as defined in Article 3.3.3, check cashing stores, cone-operated laundries, video arcades, pool halls, nail salons, beauty salons, barbershops, flea markets, secondhand surplus retail shops, roadside vending, roadside produce stands or seasonal vending, precious metal sales, and billboards. 2, to the owner's agreement to abide by the following: to the site plan received by the Community Development Department on September 4, 2012. Said site plan is site-specific and must meet or exceed the requirements of the zoning ordinance, all other applicable city ordinances, and these conditions prior to the approval of a land disturbance permit or certificate of occupancy. Unless otherwise noted herein, compliance with all conditions shall be in place prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. 3, to the owner's agreement to the following site development considerations. A, provide a 10-foot landscape strip along the south property line of the property intersecting with Hopewell Road and running north 68 degrees, 21 minutes, 12 seconds west, a distance of 89.69 feet. B, provide a 40-foot buffer along the south line of the property parallel to Thompson Road, running from the corner of an existing driveway north 80 degrees, 44 minutes, 27 seconds west, 190.43 feet to the westerly 10-foot improvement setback line. C, to delete the 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the southwest property line of property running from Hopewell Road north 68 degrees, 10 minutes, 12 seconds west, 89.69 feet, and north 21 degrees, 34 minutes, 48 seconds west, 35.46 feet to the northerly line of an existing driveway for out parcel 2. D, provide a 10-foot setback for parking adjacent to residentially used property along the south property line. To allow on-site parking located to the front of a building or between the building and the public right-of-way along Hopewell Road. F, provide a 10-foot landscape strip along the frontages of Hopewell Road and Thompson Road. G, to allow additional signage depicted in Exhibit A, and which I showed you a depiction of earlier in this presentation. And H, all improvements to the site, structure, and sign shall be reviewed and granted a certificate of appropriateness by the City of Milton Historic Preservation Commission. 4, to the owner's agreement to abide by the following requirements, dedication, and improvements. A, access to the site shall be subject to the approval of City of Milton Department of Public Works prior to the issuance of a business license, land disturbance permit, subdivision plat, or certificate of occupancy, whichever comes first. Entrances shall conform to Chapter 48 streets, sidewalks, and other public places of the City of Milton Code of Ordinances or be reconstructed to meet such criteria as required by the Department of Public Works. At a minimum, the following shall apply. 1, driveway shall be modified to provide for one-way traffic flow at a minimum width of 16 feet with entrance on Thompson Road and exit only on Hopewell Road. 2, driveway shall provide a minimum uninterrupted ingress-egress distance of 25 feet measured from the right-of-way line to the nearest edge of drive or parking space at both the entrance and exit. 3, entrance driveway shall be located a minimum of 300 feet from nearest intersection or at 95% queue distance measured from the nearest intersection. 4, exit-only driveway on Hopewell Road shall be relocated to obtain minimum required site distance of 500 feet. B, dedicate at no cost to the City of Milton prior to the approval of business license, land disturbance permit, subdivision plat, or certificate of occupancy, whichever comes first, sufficient land as necessary to provide the following rights-of-way. 1, provide at least 10.5 feet of right-of-way from the back of curb of all abutting road improvements and along the entire property frontage. 2, provide right-of-way miter at intersection of Hopewell Road and Thompson Road. Conclusion. Although the proposed rezoning is inconsistent with the future land use plan's recommendation of agricultural, equestrian, and estate residential, it is staff's opinion that by rezoning it to H Historic, it is consistent with the intent of the H Historic District to preserve the rich traditions of history and culture in Milton. In addition, staff has included a set of recommended conditions that will ensure that the proposed general store will not have a negative impact on the surrounding community. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional of RZ 12-15 to rezone from AG1 agricultural to H Historic District. That is my presentation, Mr. Chairman, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Kathy before we have the applicant come up? Okay. Joe? Sure.
I got 2 questions, if I may. Under the recommended conditions, 1A, it talks about seasonal items such as pumpkins, so on and so forth. And then further down, it talks about prohibited items, which are roadside produce stands or seasonal vending. How's that going to work?
Robin, you want to respond to that, please?
We do have administrative use permits for the roadside produce stand, well, for seasonal vending, such as a Christmas tree, so it's not a standalone long-term, so it's just items associated, seasonally with that permit. So we don't want somebody out there just doing long-term seasonal vending.
Well, it says prohibited
What's
is
prohibited?
seasonal vending. Christmas trees are seasonal.
Okay, I mean, we can get rid of seasonal vending and then just keep the roadside produce stand as an exclusion, so. Because the point is not to have, there's not enough room to have a constant, like a produce stand sitting out there. But, I mean, and also in our zoning ordinance, all items for sale have to be underneath a covered area, so really they can't extend out, whereas the stand and the potential seasonal vending would be outside of it, so it's a small difference, but whatever your pleasure is.
Well, there's a conflict in my mind.
No, I
agree.
understand.
Because
We
you're
can-
talking about pumpkins and where are they going to sell that? They can't
Well,
sell it in the store. It's going to have to go outside. On the porch.
And all items have to stay on the porch. They can't start migrating to the parking lot or the other areas of the property. All sales have to be done under a covered area.
But you can't do that for Christmas trees.
Well, that's just an option. I can't, determine how tall their Christmas trees are gonna be, so.
Well, I think we have to decide whether they're in or they're out, because the way this reads, we put it in and okay it, and then in the last sentence, we say they can't.
Well, and in keeping with that same discussion, if you go back to page 6, which is describing the subject site, it says the letter of intent further states, in keeping with those traditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and it lists goods such as holiday trees, pumpkins, hay bales, et cetera. So it's not closed when you include et cetera there. Staff's, our adopted definition has a shorter list. And then
Not really, because it says such as.
So, okay. And then we intend to bring some closure to it with the list.
Right.
So we have some stuff we have to address. And it may very well be that the applicant's intent is to, make it a more narrow. And maybe the applicant will define that for us tonight. But without the benefit of the applicant's comments tonight, we know we've got something we have to address here.
Right.
And the second thing is, we talked about the driveway, the ingress and egress, driveways, one-way traffic flow, and I'm looking at the new plan that we got, and the driveway on Thompson Road shows a two-way.
Both of them do,
Traffic.
Joe.
Well,
Hopewell
okay.
has one-way.
Right. So let me address that. The applicant hasn't been able to speak yet, but there's been conversations today between the applicant via me and the Public Works Director. And the applicant had suggested that they have a two-way entrance exit on, not on Hopewell, but on Thompson. I have this horrible block on that word. And so the Public Works Director was amenable to that proposal to have the two-way on Thompson and just the right out on Hopewell. So the applicant has presented a site plan. They haven't calculated the 95% Q, but it would be a closer, depiction of what they want to do versus the old site plan. So that's what's before you.
But it
And
can't
we'll
be,
able to explain it.
This depiction is
Yes,
closer to those
it's closer
cues?
to the it meets more of the conditions of the traffic than what the previous one, because,
Including the distances of 300 feet?
no,
from
I
center?
just said that. The only exception is they haven't calculated the Q, which, it's either 95% Q, which doesn't mean it has to be 300 feet. So that's still a calculation that has to be done. The driveway would have to be moved to meet that calculation.
How do
So
you,
that's
how do you, how do you measure the Q, Robin?
I don't know. I
I
can't.
mean, I don't know what that means.
I mean, it basically, it could be 5, 6 cars or whichever is less, whatever
Yeah.
the 95% Q is. I'm not the traffic engineer, but it's a
95%
weighted.
of what?
It's,
Probably the parking spaces.
well, it's so that, as people are coming in off of Hopewell, that they're not blocking the entrance, in a queue, trying to go out onto Hopewell. So that 95% Q is some mathematical equation that I don't know what that is based on the circumstances. So that they would not be able to they'd have to meet one or the other, either 300 feet or the 95% Q to get their entrance, so.
is,
Q is internal or external? Q is on the street?
On
Q
the
is-
street, yes. Well,
Okay.
I mean, the entrance as it relates to the street, yes.
Okay, so Q at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is very different than Q at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Correct. So, and I'm not sure how that's when it's, and how it's calculated. I'm sure it's dealt with at the high peak time, not at a non-peak time.
It is calculated at a peak time?
I'm pretty sure it is. I'm not, like I said, I'm not the traffic engineer, but I can double check into that. But that'll be resolved before the council. I mean, I know that doesn't do you any good right now, but, it has to be done one way or the other for safety with the traffic.
So I think what you're saying, as long as, you know, you make your vote contingent on the location meeting either one of those two standards, you should be fine, and then the Director of Public Works will then make that determination.
But if we change, originally this says 16 feet, and then all of a sudden we say we're going to go both ways. Can't do that on 16 feet.
Well, and that's
So
correct.
those
I mean,
footage have to change
That's
also.
right. I mean, we can adjust, or as needed for a two-way entrance. I mean, we can always adjust the conditions.
Right. Subject to the approval of the Department of Public Works.
Right.
That really confuses the issue.
Boy.
I think the applicant is just trying to implement what the recommended traffic conditions were. So, I mean, this is it's not unusual for there to be traffic conditions that don't meet the exact submitted site plan at the time of the planning commission, and they really, you know, adjust it accordingly.
Yeah, but oftentimes when we've heard those,
Mhm.
traffic is not as much of an issue, where, if I read just what was presented to us by staff tonight, it appears that every turn so far, at every opportunity so far, the community has expressed concern over traffic.
Speaking of which, I didn't see any traffic study anywhere in here at all.
It wasn't, that full scope of a traffic study wasn't required by the Public Works Department. Obviously, they did site distances and.
But it's a requirement under our approval
Well,
process, whether
but
they
it's
want
all-
it or
it's-
not.
It's based on what, and their regulations is what's defined as a traffic study. So not every application has a full-blown traffic study. It's not to say they don't do anything. It's just, you
Well,
know,
they've-
based on.
There's nothing in here at all about traffic, full-blown or not.
Well, they did their site distance, and, you know, that's what was required. And then obviously to deal with the queue, they're gonna have to have their engineer do some more additional work for dealing with the queue.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just one more
Sure,
question.
Joe.
I didn't see a campaign contribution disclosure statement.
I have one. I apologize if it, for some reason, didn't get into it, but I do have it. Is there anybody, did I just totally miss it? I don't see, did anybody else not?
I didn't see it.
I didn't see it.
It's not in there.
But if you have it, that's fine. When
I
was
do,
it-
I mean, I do have it.
When was it
It's probably
submitted?
back at the in my office.
When
but
was it submitted?
It was submitted with the application, but it was, so I apologize. I'll be happy to go get it.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
If you've got it, that's
There was
fine.
no contribution.
Okay.
George, Kim,
Yep.
keep going.
If it's questions for staff,
Yeah. Back under the environmental site analysis, we say that the applicant has said that the tanks were removed.
That's correct.
Do we have any kind of verification on that? And I tell that only from a personal experience.
I don't have anything other than the statement that had been previously made from the applicant.
Well, I bought a piece of property and I was assured that they had been removed. They had removed one, but then removed two, so they had to dig it up. Then then the ground was contaminated. So I think we need a verification.
Okay, we can ask the applicant. That's a question you can ask him as well.
okay. I only have one question, Kathy, for clarity. I'm struggling a little bit with one of the variance requests, at 3B. Provide a 40-foot buffer along the south line of the property. If I look at the drawing at the far western end of the property, it's only 46 feet from one side to the other. Where is the 40-foot buffer? see the
So-
landscape strips, I don't see the 40-foot.
Okay, it's the little tail, let me make sure this is reading right. 84, okay, so, the western part, it's right here. This is this line, so this is 40 feet of buffer here.
So there's nothing left, it's all buffer.
Right.
But it's not really, because the buffer includes, it encroaches on the landscape strip. It's not 40-foot of buffer plus a 10-foot landscape strip, because it's only 46 feet wide.
Right. Good point.
If it's only, yeah, I mean, it would be all kind of together, yes.
Okay. All right, I mean, I think the problem we're gonna have, based on the discussion, is that the recommended conditions that are in here from staff are not gonna hold up. So we're gonna have to be real careful about what we do with this. Because there's a lot of things in the recommended conditions that don't fit what we're saying.
Correct.
Okay, can I, I'm just reading this, you could, for that, 3B, provide a 36-foot buffer, because that's the least amount, because on the
Right.
comment, it says 36 on the west to 40 feet on the east, so the minimum would be 36 feet.
Right.
We can make that.
And when it says buffer, does that mean planted buffer?
Technically, yes, undisturbed buffer. Mhm.
Well, undisturbed buffer or planted buffer? Because there's nothing there right now.
Well, I mean, if there's nothing there, then yes, it would be a planted buffer, but in the end, it has to, it requires, you know, a buffer, a visual buffer. So, whether it's already there, or it needs to
Should
be
be in
planted
there.
or supplemented.
And the arborist would establish the kind of planting that would be
Right, I
required
mean,
there?
there's a standard for, visual buffer, for the buffer, yes.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about defining that.
No, it's already defined what has to happen, if it has to be filled in.
And the same thing with landscape strip, or is
Yeah,
that
it's
planted
all-
or unplanted?
A landscape strip has a certain standard, so when we do plan review, they'll be required to plant it to our standards for a 10-foot landscape strip, so you don't have to get into the details.
I have one last question before we get the applicant up, and that's just for clarity. This piece of property that we're looking at, when you look at it in the whole, is one parcel, is it not? One tax lot?
Currently, it is under one tax parcel ID.
Is it being subdivided?
It is not being subdivided, but it will be zoned, a portion of it will be zoned for the historic, but not the remainder of the 1 acre that contains the house.
Is that zoning gonna be based on the survey points that are on this drawing?
It is, yes, because I have the legal description, you know, for that .5
Okay.
acre.
I would like to point out, for the sake of discussion, that when I look back at the recommendation that was made by the Historic Preservation Commission to the council, the picture of the site that was proposed to be approved for historic zoning was the entire parcel.
And I went back and looked at the actual ordinance and what was adopted, and it was only, the legal description in the ordinance was only the .5.
But I saw nothing in the discussion or the minutes of that meeting that changed from what was presented by the Historic Preservation Commission. The Historic Preservation Commission recommendation was the entire parcel.
Not what was actually adopted by ordinance only included the .56 acre, and that's how it was adopted
Okay.
in the ordinance.
Okay, any other questions for
I have one more.
staff?
Or,
Go ahead.
in 3H, where it says all improvements to the site, structure and sign should be reviewed by the granted a certificate of appropriateness by the City of Milton Historic Preservation Commission. What kind of improvements is staff contemplating there when the historic designation doesn't really allow for any improvements?
It could, I mean, the signs are one thing, there could, maybe Kathy can address.
Yeah, I mean, whatever changes to the
Landscaping.
exterior are under the purview of the HPC as opposed to the DRB.
Right.
But
So,
we're not
but what-
looking, you know,
But if it was declared historic based on on what it is,
right,
you really can't change anything to the structure, right?
Right, but they, we're talking about signs, maybe there's an awning, and I'm just hypothetically, but basically, any changes at all, if they took down the porch or a section of the porch because it was rotten and they didn't want to replace it and they just wanted to make a smaller porch, that's the type of thing that the HPC would have to review.
Well, to that point, according to this, I believe it says it proposes a porch on the side.
That's incorrect. There is no
I know.
proposed porch. I mean, I know it's on the site plan. I guess you'd have to ask the applicant about that, and then we can
Okay.
deal with that.
I'm being hypothetical again, but in theory, the HPC cannot look at anything interior to a structure. They can only look to things exterior to a structure.
Okay.
And that would include signage.
I have a follow-up question to yours about the property. They're not going to be subdivided?
No,
So they're both for sale. Are they for sale together?
you would have to ask the applicant that.
Can they be sold? I mean, from a Milton City point, can they be sold separately if they're not subdivided?
If it's not subdivided, I don't think it can be, no.
No.
The house would have to remain with the main, the general store.
But we're not absolute about that.
I'm like
we're absolute about
99%
the
sure
fact
you
that it can't
couldn't
be
deed
sold.
over a
Can't
piece
be
of property
sold one
without
without the other.
subdividing
No,
it, correct?
without being subdivided.
Divide it first.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. David, you want to speak? Guess not.
I'm Deborah Anthony, and I am speaking on behalf of the applicant, Reunion Park. My business address is 5780 Windward Parkway, Suite 300, Alpharetta, Georgia. And also, I'll introduce David Chatham. His business address is also 5780 Windward Parkway, Suite 300, Georgia. And he's also Milton resident at 1865 Bethany Way. What we're talking about tonight is to request the rezoning of this historic property to its previous use, and we specifically identified, working with staff, conditions that would reduce the impact on the surrounding areas through the use of buffers, landscaping, and screening. And we also work to comply with the Northwest Fulton overlay and keeping the structure intact. And we also, when we looked at signage and wanted to get something that would be in keeping with the way that the stores have the old Coke signs and things like that, there are some things that vary somewhat from the sign overlay, so we asked for the conditions for that. And all of that, we're the first ones down the pike with the historic use, so we're sort of going through as best we can with this. But a lot of the things that would normally be variances under a normal zoning would be conditions for these properties because they share some of the same some of the same issues, in that they don't necessarily conform to modern zoning because they came about at a time when things were different. And so that's what we're trying to do here with this plan. And we've gone through the staff report, and it's the recommendations and the conditions that are stated are in keeping with what we put together with the application, with the exception of what's required with Public Works. And actually, when we got the staff recommendations, we quickly put together this plan that you have just seen for the first time. This is not final. It's just intended to show how it might work. And we're committed to working with Public Works to make sure that getting in and out is safe. One of the things that we know that we can do is, for example, reduce the parking spaces to 4, and that's why we've been able to open up some of that area. and I'll probably let Mr. Chatham talk about that, but we would also like to reserve any remainder for, in case there's some questions to address later on.
Okay.
David
Anybody-
Chatham, 1865 Bethany Way. The staff recommendations are fine. We would like to work with the Director of Public Works and our engineer and be sure we get the safety and the traffic and the ingress and egress worked out. The first conversation we had with our engineer, he recommended that we do ingress and egress on Thompson and just exiting onto Hopewell from a safety standpoint. I think everything else we can work with fine, and be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time. Thanks.
Anyone who would like to speak in opposition?
Yes, I have. Okay, what, can you, fill out a card? I already did, it's right there. Okay, and then I have Mr. Shellhorn. I do. You want to go first? Anybody else want to talk?
Okay. This, many of you may or may not know, this is the third time in 5 years that I had to,
We can just start over.
we've been up here over and over again.
Address.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Bill Shellhorn, 225 Orchard Bend Trail, Milton. And this is the third time that we've gone through this process with the applicant in 5 years. And just so that you know, I jog by this intersection every day, 5-6 days a week, and I drive by it every day. I have not seen any tanks being removed from that property, number one. I would think that, I remember in one afternoon, somebody came in and they paved the entire property in a day. And I would think that there would be, there'd be permits and inspections and some things that someone would have to go through from a regulation perspective to pull gas tanks out of the ground. And I would think that information would be readily available and provable if in fact that did take place. So I would ask that you follow through on that, and I appreciate your concern there.
Can I interrupt you, just for clarity? The representation that's made here is that those tanks were removed before the current owner purchased the property.
Okay.
So it wasn't within the time frame you're talking about.
Okay. All right, well, I have lived there since '93, and the building has pretty much been, very quiet all those years, at least from my memory, so it must have happened before then. But I do recommend that you deny this application. The zoning is in direct conflict with Milton's comprehensive land use plan, which states that no commercial property will be allowed within what is considered Milton's rural residential neighborhood. I think you're setting a legal precedent here that's very, very dangerous. If you allow H or C or whatever you allow, you're letting any other property owner that happens to have an acre and a half of property and they've got an old outbuilding that sits out there that may be 50 years old, to allow them to go ahead and develop that commercially on less than an acre. This is AG1, minimum 1 acre property. And this is a half an acre of property. That just flies in the face of everything that our area is all about. The applicant's also requesting several concurrent variances. We talked about some of those before. Just pull up a map, just pull up a Google map and look at the property. You're not gonna be able to sell Christmas trees on that property. You're not gonna be able to put 6 cars, let alone put 6 cars on there. And then, Christmas trees, you go out and you sell Christmas trees on Roswell Road in an empty parking lot. You don't sell them, next door to where I live. Thank you very much. It's just not right from my perspective. And I would ask y'all to pull up a Google map and look at it. You physically can't make this happen on that property. There's just not enough room there. And if you have a half an acre, how do you get the zoning for that? I mean, how are you gonna then set a precedent so that anyone could go out and develop a half an acre on the commercially in the interior Milton? The commercial development in our residential and agricultural properties will not preserve the historic architecture of our community. It'll do just the opposite, and starkly and permanently degrade Milton's beautiful residential setting and rural landscape. We believe it would be much better for us to focus and encourage our commercial development and our retail development in shops in Birmingham and Crabapple and other commercial areas that are struggling in these difficult times. We should focus on supporting them and on supporting our land use plan into the future. And I would really appreciate that if you would recommend denial tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, Jody Martin, 15350 Thompson Road. As I said, I can see this property. If you want to pull up the map, I will point out where my house is, and I can view this store from my porch. My property is zoned A1, and I'm also CUVA designated. I am the Joe Public that was referenced in the earlier slides as far as attending the meetings and voicing concerns. I tried to make notes throughout the staff's presentation, so please bear with me as I address several points. Regarding the restricted use, associated accessory uses, it's mentioned in there that it will not be used as a fast food establishment. Going back to what Bill had indicated initially, the applicant initially went for commercial use on this property to intend to have it be a restaurant several years ago, and that was denied. And so since then, the applicant has gone down the historical route. And we feel as homeowners in the area and property owners that this is just a stepping stone to try to get it to be that commercial zoning that he is seeking. I also noticed in the staff's report that it talked about he would be serving homemade sandwiches and sodas. I don't think this is a far fall from a restaurant that was intentionally or intended initially. So I would ask you to look between what's written and really evaluate that. Regarding the historical use of the property, I was here at that September 27th meeting, and I'm sorry, your name again? Deborah Anthony was here and talked with the 5 or 6 of us as homeowners in the area, and we were told that the applicant, Mr. Chatham's interest in the store was based on his 90-year-old mother wanting to see it become a general store before she passed away. If that is the case, I would encourage him to relocate the store to a more suitable property to do that so that that wish can be fulfilled versus having it done in its current location. Variance requesting modeling the commercial property. Variances in regard to buffers and setbacks. It's been mentioned already that the property is 0.5 an acre. You know, a lot of times we can look and see on a piece of paper what something looks like. This property that's in consideration is not far from where we sit right now. I would encourage each of you to go and drive and look at the property. Look at the areas that are around it. I don't feel that the buffers would do it justice and are insufficient to what is being proposed here. As mentioned earlier, the applicant does own the adjacent property, so there is a thought by the homeowners that at some point it too would become part of this historical and then at one point go to commercial for his ultimate intended use. So we're concerned about that. You will notice if you look at the Milton maps that there is very little commercial or what I'll call developed other than residential or agricultural property west of Highway 9. That is one of the things that makes Milton such a great community, and I would strongly encourage you to continue that theme and limit use that pushes those boundaries. Again, echoing Bill's comment that the area is currently ag zoned, that it is not consistent with the models of the other properties and surrounding areas in question.
3 minutes left.
I'm sorry?
You have 3 minutes left.
Okay. As far as grocery store in the area, if you live in the area and are familiar with the area, we have 3 Publix, 2 Walmarts, and 2 Krogers within a 5-mile radius. There is nothing this store could provide anyone in the immediate area that isn't already provided. I have concerns over the hours of operation of the store in that there are residential areas immediately adjacent to and in view of the store. And as far as home value impact, I would encourage you to speak with the homeowners that are in closest proximity. We do not feel this would certainly add to our value of our property, which has already been severely hit by the economy, but would further impact it in a negative way. I do want to spend some time on the traffic study. This was something that we raised specifically on the September 27th meeting because all the photos that the applicant provides are the most complimentary of the area. There is a significant grade drop just north of this store that has extremely limited sight distance, and there are accidents that occur there at least on a monthly basis, if not weekly, because of the break in Thompson and traffic going out north and south, and then on the west side of Thompson, again, north and south. So my concern over putting a exit out off of this property onto Hopewell with those two breaks in Thompson and in what Jim Craig had described as an entrance to the park also on Hopewell, which would be within 200 feet of the store, which would also require a turn-in lane, would be highly congested. Likewise, with an exit two-way onto Thompson, on the west side of Thompson, the west side of the store, there is a fire station, an emergency station very close to that. So I would encourage you to look at that as well.
1 minute left.
Also new to the area on Hopewell is a brand new high school, which I'm sure you are aware of, which has increased traffic already in our area. You know, the best I could leave you with is obviously you can hear that I'm opposed to the store. I would encourage you again to look at the EPA records to see if in fact the tanks have been removed, to look and see if there have been soil studies on leakage of gasoline or petroleum in the area. There are already a number of vacant stores and plazas in Milton. To create another store, which at some point could be vacant again, as the sundries or items that they supply are readily available again at many local merchants and much larger stores in the area, are of great concern. And I guess the last thing that I would leave you with, or two last thoughts, would be Mr. Chatham is a developer, has been a developer in the area for a long time, and I think that is his continued attention here. Please don't try to put a square peg in a round hole as far as this property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Looks like you've got about 6 minutes left.
Okay. I'm just going to address some of the points that were raised. Actually, doing this kind of zoning with the conditions and with the double requirements of a rezoning plus certificates of appropriateness from the Historic Commission is probably the best way to make sure that this is the least intense use. So I think that this is a way to actually ensure that the property will not be used for a more intense use. The other piece of property is still agricultural, and one of the reasons that it had to be 0.5 something acres is so that the other piece would remain agricultural and it would serve as a buffer for this corner.
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
It serves as a buffer. The surrounding agricultural piece serves as a buffer for this corner. The historic district is unique in that it does not save as a precedent the use of the historic property. For example, it's not that it's zoned commercial, it's that it's zoned historic. So that is the only precedent that it has. So you would have to have something that is also historic with the same basic conditions in order for it to be any kind of precedent at all. So this is not really something that could be used even for the piece of property right next door to, the same parcel, to get a commercial zoning. And that's the whole purpose of the historic use, so that you don't have the historic use necessarily be a precedent for the other area. It's unique unto itself. On the traffic, we will, as Mr. Chatham discussed previously, continue to work with Public Works until they are comfortable with it. And with only 4 parking spaces there, or 5, counting the handicap, there's not going to be a lot of cars in there at one time. It's not an intense use. It's 1,200 square feet. On the country store, the seasonal items, just wanted to clarify, this is more decorative than Big John's Christmas tree lots. If you've ever been in the mountains and driven around to the country stores, you see that they put displays on their front porches and things like that. That's really what we're more talking about on seasonal items. And these little country stores, basically they carry a little bit of a lot, but not a lot of any little bit. I mean, I think that's the merchandising that's involved. It's not meant to replace a Publix or a Kroger. It's really where people used to go and sit on the front porch and play checkers and get a cup of coffee.
3 minutes.
And that's really more what we're talking about. So I'd just like to leave that with you. What we're really looking for is to preserve the nostalgia of the country store and to be part of the community. And remember, it was there first, and they probably sat there in their house, which was in the same area, and said, "Oh, look at all these big subdivisions coming up." So it's just this is really a throwback to what it was like back in the rural past. Thanks.
Okay. Questions for the applicant? Who wants to go first? Nobody's jumping in. I'll go.
Are we closing the public hearing and you're just going to ask questions?
Well, they still got some time left,
Okay.
don't they? Do you want to reserve the time you have left, or are we done? I mean,
I think we're done. I mean, as
Okay.
far as we could just answer the questions.
okay.
I move we close public hearing.
Okay.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Questions for the applicant? I'll go first.
Okay. Start.
Yes, please. You don't have to both come if you don't want to, but whoever's going to speak should be at the microphone. I just have some questions. I'm going to refer to this latest drawing. There's an indication of the approximate existing septic field area on here. Is the area that's there adequate for both the primary field and the backup field?
I'm not sure there is a backup. Yeah, I think there is plenty of room for that if you consider the entire buffer area. This was, I'm not sure the time the septic tank was installed, but we did have a permit prior to the city of Milton with Fulton County when we did some of the remodel on the inside back at that time.
Is the septic system for this building separate from the house?
Yes.
Okay. Reunion Park LLC owns the entire parcel now?
Yes.
And is the house leased?
Yes.
If Reunion Park owns the entire parcel, what's the need for an easement, an access easement between the two parcels?
You're speaking of the driveway there?
Mhm.
That's the current driveway, and we'd like for them to be able to continue to use Thompson Road in their ingress.
But what's the purpose of the easement if both parcels are owned by the same person? I don't understand the purpose of the easement.
I think that was a staff recommendation.
Legally, it doesn't make any sense.
It's fine either way, as long as it can be used through there, it's fine with me.
I didn't know whether there was some plan to do something with the other part of the parcel. So the intent is to not change the ownership of the entire parcel. Okay. One of the conditions that staff had recommended, unless it's changed, was a 500-foot site distance. As I look at your drawing in the lower right-hand corner, it shows the site distance both directions from the current driveway as being less than 500 feet. How is moving the driveway going to accomplish the 500-foot site distance?
I really can't speak to the site distance without the engineers conferring on that and coming up with a solution, so I don't
Well,
really
if
know
it's
how to-
not 500 feet in either direction, moving it's not going to get 500 feet in both directions. That's, I guess, my point. I'm not sure how we, if that's a condition that you're saying you're willing to accept, I'm not sure how you
Well,
can
the-
physically achieve that.
I think what we're willing to accept is to work with the Public Works Department to achieve site distances and intersection setback, intersection curb cuts distances.
Okay. A question was raised about hours of operation. I don't remember seeing anything in the conditions about hours of operation. Is that something that you've contemplated?
No, I haven't contemplated the hours, to be honest.
Okay. You talked a little bit about your point of view on seasonal selling or selling seasonal items. I'm struggling with another inconsistency, Robin and Kathy, in the recommended conditions. It says that it would be approved for homemade sandwiches, coffee, non-alcoholic beverages, and lunch items. That's the definition of a fast food restaurant. And yet later it says fast food restaurants are excluded. How do we do that?
Well, I think typically we look at a fast food restaurant as if there was absolutely no tables. I guess to accommodate that, then they would have to provide
Well,
some.
fast food restaurant, per the definition, says food to be served on premises or off. So we can't have it both ways. It isn't a McDonald's, I know that, but per the definition of a fast food restaurant, what they're proposing defines the fast food restaurant, I think. Or it's consistent with that definition, I guess I should say. I mean, I don't know whether these things were all kind of just thrown in here to give you options, or whether this really is kind of your view of what you want to do here. That's why I'm asking, because we can't exclude it on one hand and say it's allowed on the other.
I think part of this occurred, this was my Uncle Bill and Aunt Margaret Hardeman's store, which they bought back in 1964 from, I think, Mr. McWaters, who owned the store previously. And there might have even been a previous owner to that. He sold just about everything you find in a little general grocery store, including, fresh meat, and he made sandwiches, and we were trying to just go back and remember some of the things he did back in the 60s when he had the store. And I think that's where some of that came from. He had cheese, cheeses and meats and every other kind of staple good that you would have in a community like this. I think that's where some of this history came from. It was never, and that's not our intent to be a fast food, but that is some of the things he did back when he had the store here.
With respect to homemade sandwiches, would they be made on premises, or would they be made somewhere else?
I think the intention is that they would be made on premises.
Okay.
I mean, that's certainly the way he did it when he had the store.
Do you have any recollection or history of when you think the tanks were removed?
Yeah, y'all mentioned that. My Uncle Bill and Aunt Margaret had two sons, Melvin and Mike, who no longer live in the area. And they just said the tanks were removed. The actual pumps that were out front, I think, were removed in the 80s, 81, 82. And there's probably no records, I'll be very honest with you. That was part of the problem of trying to reopen the store. They didn't even have business licenses back in the 50s and 60s, so the records are not, I'm afraid there's not going to be any records of that. I'm giving you what he's told me.
Sure. One last question. One of the conditions that staff has proposed is to allow additional signage depicted in Exhibit A. Is Exhibit A the extent of the signage, or is it in fact intended to be additional signage?
Yeah, we were just trying to put it back in the way that it was when my Uncle Bill had the store. There's a picture in the application, actually, of him standing in front of the store.
Right.
And you see Hardeman Grocery. I think it's Hardeman Grocery on the front. And you see the old Coca-Cola sign. Yeah, thank you, Bill. Back to speak, my Uncle Bill standing
Stephen, I guess my question was, do you?
That's the extent of the signage.
Okay, that
Yes.
was my question.
Unless we're required to do additional signage, that's all we had planned to do.
Do you mind if I ask, mirrored on the other side as well, or?
He had both sides. We're only showing one side of the store.
Okay.
I mean, to put it back like it was, we'd like
Yeah, it means split, yeah. Like,
I don't have anything else till 36.
This is my picture. I have on what page?
I'm at 36.
On 28, just the very first sentence, the spacing on that looks like it didn't work.
Where are you?
Top left row of views.
Oh. I didn't even
It's
see
not
that.
quite a run-on sentence, it's a
Run-on
run-on word.
That's a word we've never seen before.
Supercalifragilistic.
Even longer. Paul, on page 29, is that the roundabout you're talking about?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, that's south of the park.
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah, that's right where Strawberry Fields is.
Okay, thank you.
George, I don't have anything, and this is that call.
Page 34, if, back to Paul's question, if this is intended to be something that we're gonna try and fool everybody, I think it predates, you know, the form-based code, the historic preservation guideline, well, those aren't done, but the form-based code is done.
The guidelines are done.
The historic preservation guidelines,
Mm-hmm.
they are?
Yep, right Kathy? Yep, yep, we adopted them, I think, right around the same time we had to do them this summer when.
Yeah, we needed to adopt them in order to approve the Cardinal Store as an historic site. You need something to base that approval on.
Boy, I must have been asleep, I don't remember that.
I don't remember seeing them.
Okay. Anyway.
That might have helped us
Okay, so what's the?
tonight.
Oh.
I mean, the crabapple form-based code's done, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't really need to be on the list as a 5-year
TBD.
Oh,
plan.
well, ARC request, I mean, it's just, a good thing to do to keep these things on the list, and, you know, is, even if it's checked off, as in done already, because it goes towards saying that you've accomplished items from the LCI.
Well, should we designate that as completed then? And if the historic preservation guidelines are completed?
Well, it says 2012.
No, it
Right.
says starting year 2012.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't have an ending either, so.
Right, there's no ending.
Well, if you look at the last paragraph above, it talks about the recent adoption of the
Mhm.
form-based code.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it does mention that it was adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My question, I guess, with respect to all this stuff in 36, 37, 38, 39, it just seems like there's an awful lot more here than I remember being in the comprehensive land use plan or the transportation plan for only the crabapple area.
The projects.
Yeah,
Well-
this is not an expanded list?
We just combined all the projects that we had on the books already, all the proposed projects from Lou's plan
Okay.
and everything. We just put it all on this table because it
Okay.
helps with additional funding.
Okay. I had a question on 40. Under the 2022 population and employment,
Mhm.
I don't really, it says it's estimated that 2,245 people currently live in the study area and 386 people work there.
Mhm.
Is there double counting there, or are those independent? I mean, are the 386 part of the 2,245, or are they in addition to?
Well, not necessarily, because they could live
Live there,
outside of Milton, or they
So
could.
what, I don't understand the point of those numbers.
Or it just talks about the residential population, and it talks about employment numbers.
So if I look at 2,245 people currently live in the study area, and then I look at the population projections down below, the first number I see is 2,171 plus 74 and no multifamily. Okay. The multifamily, I understand the current, but the multifamily, it says, assumes that it's primarily assisted living or senior units. How do we make that assumption?
I think Caleb, who wrote this, went back to the plan and talked to Lou, because Lou does make mention in there of some senior units, so he needed to capture that.
I think a lot of
But that-
Lou's plan on the mid-Broadwell had a lot of.
Yeah.
It had, but the stuff on
Yeah.
Mid-Broadwell was multifamily. I mean, who lives in that multifamily is a different issue, isn't it? I mean, to me, assisted living and multifamily are two different things.
Absolutely.
Well, it talks about senior-oriented multifamily.
I mean, you could have seniors living in multifamily. You
Mhm.
can't have
Multi-
multifamily living in
in
assisted
seniors.
living.
Or assisted living.
I mean, I just don't understand the purpose
Okay,
of
so
putting
that is-
the footnote there.
This,
I mean,
yeah, the footnote is the problem, okay.
I mean, unless it was an assumption, unless you wanted to say that, you know, multifamily could include, but saying it assumes primarily assisted living or senior units, to me, is too strong a statement.
Okay, so,
Why don't we just take out footnote?
yeah.
That works for me.
On that same page with the employment projections, I don't know how they get this 13 people working in retail restaurants.
Planned projections,
Seems a little low, doesn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, considering that.
How many have you
there-
got?
There's probably 50 in the pub alone.
All right, we'll circle that, we'll
I mean, that's
recheck.
mainly what Crabapple is, with restaurants sometimes.
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
retail.
That's
seems
probably
awfully low.
Milton's.
Or
over
did
there,
that-
yeah.
Or have they,
Oh, in Milton's? Oh.
would there be 13 restaurants? Is that what they're trying to say? Would there be
It
that
says
many?
employment
Says
projections.
employees.
I know it says that, I know,
Yeah.
but,
Probably another 50.
but did they take the count as the number of restaurants versus people?
But see, this goes back to my question from before about the 386. I mean, are they only counting
Right.
people from outside the area that work here, or is the 386 part of the 2245? I don't,
Or a combination
No,
thereof.
I think it's outside.
It's just
there's gotta be more than 386
Yeah,
people
right.
working in Milton.
in,
Oh, no,
in,
no.
in
In
a
Crab
crab
Apple.
apple,
Crab Apple.
okay.
Well,
We'll
how many people do the schools employ?
Right.
The schools gotta employ more than 226 people
Mm-hmm.
between all those schools.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point.
So we need to look
Yep.
both of those.
I didn't have anything else.
That was a big thing, though. That's
Yeah.
a lot of it.
I don't believe. Nope. Paul neither.
Okay. Next item.
You guys missed
Will
one.
some,
You missed one?
took
What?
the words
You missed
right
the
out of
mistake
my
on
mouth.
page, 42.
I'm sorry,
Paragraph
but
six.
there are others in
If
there.
it's a typo, we weren't
that
gonna look at
I-
it.
Well, that's true, but.
Even though I didn't bring it with me, I did have several. So my point was going to be, to end this conversation, is somebody go back and prove this, whatever this group you talk about all the time, Robin, that you say, oh, the such and such will pick that up. These errors, spelling errors,
Oh, you mean the, Unicode?
yeah,
Well, this won't go to Unicode, so yeah.
well, Then we need
Wait,
to,
Okay, where are we?
you check that.
We're on to the next item, update on community development projects.
Oh, we're over this, okay. I was just trying to point out a mistake that,
Okay, but we're all set.
Okay.
Okay, Maureen, I just
I'll give this back to Michelle.
wanted to spend a few minutes, telling you we've got a lot of planning projects, zoning underway or about to be underway. George is your representative onto the, form-based code stakeholder committee, that is underway at the moment for the Deerfield Route 9, LCI study area. We did the plan, which was the LCI study. Now we're
I'm sorry, don't they need to make a formal vote to recommend approval with changes? I mean, have you guys done that in the past?
For what, the LCI plan?
Uh-huh.
That depends. What's gonna happen to it from here?
Well, it's gonna go to the council for a work session on, what day is that, the 10th? And then on the 17th, a resolution will be requesting adoption of the plan.
This is one of those things where it's awfully hard to make a motion to approve when we don't know what we're approving.
Oh,
I guess to support it.
yeah, just.
I guess we can recommend approval based on the changes that we recommended tonight, but subject to correcting the typos that we send you between now and some date.
Well, I mean, I think that's a given, that will.
Okay. All right. We need a motion to approve then, subject to our changes tonight.
I'll make a motion to approve subject to changes.
Second it?
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. You got it, Rob.
Yep, okay. All right, so, let me go back to the Deerfield. So we completed the planning study. Now we're doing the zoning, which is going to implement the planning study. And we're using the form-based code type of zoning, just like we did in Crabapple. And we have a stakeholder committee that is, been working with us on this. There will also be a TDR section to this as well. We have the first draft of the form-based code that is, is that out yet?
Yes, it went out.
Yeah, there's an O, and
The
then
big question.
the second one, the version one will be on Thursday.
Okay, we have, the draft number 2, you'll be receiving by the end of the week, okay?
Okay.
And, so we're moving through the drafts.
And the public meeting's Tuesday.
Right, and then next Tuesday, we have, a stakeholder meeting in the morning, and then that evening, here in this room, we'll have a public meeting on it. And that time, we'll go over the proposed form-based code for Deerfield, as well as the, TDR, concept. And we'll have our consultant from California discuss that. And then, once the stakeholder committee signs off on it, it's the same process that we used for Crabapple. It will come to, the planning commission for your review. And our intent is to give you 2 months to review it, like we did last time. And we'll have both consultants here to give you the review. And then, from there, it will go on to the council.
Do you anticipate that being on the January agenda for the first time?
Could be.
Not before that.
No, I mean, let's see, it's going to, it won't be,
I mean, I
it
know
might
it's
be
not-
January and February for this group,
Okay.
and then March for the city council.
Yeah,
Okay.
March.
George just
Yeah.
said that I didn't. There's a meeting, I'm sorry, I don't have to redo it for me, but next week, Tuesday, there's a meeting?
Yes.
Public meeting, yes.
On the LCI.
On the Highway 9 form-based code.
Yeah,
Public meeting.
Public meeting.
public
Public meeting.
information meeting,
Okay.
here in this room. Yes. It's just an informational meeting, it's not a public hearing. It's
Okay.
just- So that's moving along, and, so that's just a briefing on that. But I will tell you that, one of the issues that came out of the stakeholder committee on Deerfield was the fact that we have this area that we nicknamed Route 9 North, for lack of a better title, which is that area, north of Bethany Bend, that was never included in the original LCI study. It goes all the way up to Forsyth County.
Right.
And it's sort of an unprotected area, in that it really hasn't been looked at from a planning perspective, and then certainly not zoning perspective. So, and we have a map here that shows it in your packet. And I can find mine. And this area was mentioned in the comp plan as one of the gateways to the city that should have further study. And the stakeholder committee said, well, why aren't you looking at this area? And so we agreed that something needed to be done with this sooner than later. And my thought was, we have the expertise in-house to do it, an in-house planning study. We don't have to hire a consultant for this area. And so we're looking at in the January to March timeframe where we will organize and hold a charrette up in the area. We're probably gonna go up to, where is it, Crooked Creek?
Crooked Creek.
To the clubhouse and hold it there. And come up with a planning study with, after we've gone through a process, a community process. It involves certainly the stakeholder committee and the HOA and business owners, all the key stakeholders from that area as well, to come up with a plan that we will then bring back to you all for your review and approval and then on to the city council. And once we get a plan in place for this area, we'll then do a zoning. We'll do a form-based code and we'll amend the Deerfield area, the Deerfield form-based code, and put this area in it so that it will be covered. Because right now it's uncovered and unplanned. So it's small enough that we'll be able to do it ourselves. We've got the transportation planner, we've got our planners. There's more than enough expertise to do this. But I really want to make sure that we cover this area so we don't leave it out.
Yep.
Okay? So, then secondly, there was,
Liquor distribution.
as you know, as you know, the comp plan also spoke in regard to priority master planning areas, and in that it includes the Arnold Mill corridor. And we had hoped to do an LCI study for the Arnold Mill corridor last year, and had looked to Roswell to be our partners, and Roswell at that time said, no, they didn't have enough time to do it, and could we put it off a year? So this year, because the application period is this fall, we went back to Roswell, and they said, no, we're really not interested. We think that the zoning we have in place is fine. We really don't want to do anything. So I had a discussion with the ARC planning, land use staff, Dan Reuter's group, which is the land use division of ARC. And I did this in McDonough when I was there, in that I asked them to come in as a group, as a consulting group, and provide us the expertise to do a planning study for this area. And rather than going through a very expensive, lengthy LCI process, this area is not that large. It's something that can be done with us and enhanced staff using the ARC group. They did a really great community charrette, week-long charrette. They came up with a fine plan that was subsequently approved by the council, and I think that model can be used. And they've agreed to come in for a minimum amount of money. I think probably did the whole thing for $5,000, as opposed to $120,000, and come up with, I think, a plan for the Arnold Mill corridor that we can then take that plan once it's approved and put some zoning in place for that as well. Because I really see the Arnold Mill corridor is really heating up once Crabapple gets developed, and I'll tell you, it is really, there's not much left in Crabapple at this point. I can see that development moving right up the corridor, so I really want to get in there ahead of all this and do the plan, do the zoning, so that area is protected as well. So we look to do this for late spring. So,
Good.
Very good.
Excellent.
any event, that's where we are. So it'll be busy.
One question that I know is gonna come up, but just to anticipate, we need to understand what the restrictions are with respect to the landfill, what we can do, when we can do it.
That's a big issue,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Big
and-
stakeholder in that area.
Yeah.
And we talked with the, I believe it was the owners. Carter went when John Rebar was here, and Lance Lodge went, and we talked to them, and I don't remember remember everything, but, there are some restrictions. We can't build anything out there. So,
For some period of time.
not for our lifetime.
Really?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So-
not
so-
what we were told before.
So there's no structure apart from where the current structure is. We could probably build something in that vicinity, but not on top of the landfill,
You can do windmills, right?
probably.
Something like
They,
windmills,
they,
and
they,
that's about
they,
it.
they're looking into like real, very green type stuff. They're like to say that they're,
That's what they want, or that's all that's allowed?
well, that's what they want.
Yeah,
They
but that's
like-
not the question,
I-
what's allowed?
Okay, well,
I mean, the
like I
last
said-
time we talked about this, because it's not a typical landfill, it's only a construction debris
correct,
landfill,
correct,
right?
yeah, yeah.
I thought there was a finite period of time that it couldn't be built on. But that finite period, you're saying is longer than our lifetime?
Well, I mean,
Well, I think that's one of the issues.
Whose
we're gonna
lifetime,
have
ours
to
or
figure out.
Good point.
Yeah, we have to find out. what
Define
the size
lifetime.
of the debris
Yeah,
is
I mean-
in the future,
Okay.
But that's,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
that's a
we'll-
really big issue.
Okay.
I don't want to digress, but would you repeat during that meeting, we had talked about that space up on, next to the store, that's cleared?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
That property was
President
all,
Willett,
because
yes.
I was going to ask you at the end about that. You know, all at once, it looked like it was a development going on back there. I mean, it's- the ground's all been,
Landfill.
Yeah, he was just moving dirt.
they just did what?
He's just moving dirt around to cover stuff up. All this. He's got a small bulldozer back there.
Oh, really?
Didn't he originally knock down trees to do it? It was originally cleared, right?
I don't know.
It stands out. I couldn't believe
Yeah,
it when
went-
you were
yeah,
driving
it
down
went
through
from
there.
wooded to clay.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
So that's it, just to keep you in the loop, you'll all be asked to participate to be good charrette goers when we have our charrettes. So, I'll be reminding you of those dates as they come along, but, we're just good planning, we'll be doing.
Can I just see if you guys had any comments on the dates?
I do.
Okay.
I got, I gotta find it. The one I picked up is the one you left on the table here, and that's not the one I marked up. There were 3 dates I wanted to ask about whether we wanted to keep or change because of potential holiday conflicts. No, all we have to do is find it.
7/2.
Here it is. First one was May 28th.
Oh,
May 27th is the Memorial Day holiday. So I don't know, usually we try not to have them the day after a Monday holiday, just because people go away and all that kind of stuff, so. That was one that I wanted to ask about, do we want to move the 28th to a different day? 28th of May? Could it be moved to the prior week? I mean, how much flexibility do we have, Robin, so we don't screw you guys up?
I mean, that's a long month, I mean, the way it lands, I mean, I guess we could do, the BZA meets on the third Tuesday, so maybe if you wanted to do it like the 22nd of May, on the Wednesday.
That's fine.
That's good.
Does that work? All right, so make it May 22nd.
5/22.
The next one is 11/26. That's
Yeah.
the Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
In Fulton County, just let, that whole week will be a vacation week for school now. Whereas before it was just Monday, Tuesday, or I mean, just Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
The whole week?
Yeah, so Fulton County, you get the whole week off now.
Most of
starting
the other
next calendar
counties
year.
did it this year.
Yeah,
My kids were mad.
yeah.
So
Well, anyway,
so
so we'll
next year
probably- yeah, we'll
Thanksgiving
probably
is
be
on
gone.
20. Thanksgiving's the 28th
Yes.
28th.
next year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we could do the, Wednesday, the 20th.
Yeah.
Okay, make it 11/20. And then the same thing, well, not the same thing, I just, the 12/18 you made on a Wednesday on purpose?
Right, because I can't do it on a Tuesday because there's a BZA.
Okay,
I mean,
George,
I'd rather not.
go.
7/2.
No, that's just when that is filing deadline.
That's just the filing deadline.
Yeah, that's.
Oh,
I
sorry.
misspoke.
Well, you're
That was
right.
the week
You're right.
before.
I wasn't looking above it either.
Okay, so we We changed two of them. We changed 5/28 to 5/22, and we changed November 26 to November 20. I think the rest of them are okay.
Okay, so I'll go to the council on the 17th and 19th, and it's in December.
The only other thing I wanted to ask about, just because I'm anticipating, it looks like we're gonna have a pretty hefty agenda in December, and I really think we may wanna talk about having a pre-meeting this time, because there's several zoning items that are gonna be on the agenda for next meeting, I think.
Are you talking about
Great.
just like a 6 PM start, or even?
Well, I don't know, that's what I wanted to talk about. There's 3 rezonings on the agenda.
There's a use permit and 2 rezonings, they're pretty hefty, yes.
Well, the one particularly,
Well,
it's gonna bring out a crowd. The one on Hopewell Road behind all those apartments.
You know, the meeting's on the 19th, it's hard enough to find dates during the holidays anyway, so, I mean, I'm perfectly fine doing it before the meeting. I'm not sure an hour's enough, I guess that's all I was suggesting. Maybe we ought to try and do a little earlier than that, 5:30? 5:30, all right with everybody?
Not an issue.
Okay, 5:30 on the 19th.
12, 19, 12.
The other thing is, and unfortunately, it won't work that night because of the length of the agenda, but we have traditionally gone out to dinner with the staff to celebrate Christmas, and we need to talk about when or if we're gonna do that, and the 19th, I don't think is gonna work. Not unless we're talking about breakfast.
Right.
So, do you guys have any suggestions? Just for a date, that's all.
We could do it the next night. We could do it 20th.
The 20th?
Oh, yeah, there's a
We can
Thursday,
celebrate my
correct.
birthday.
No, it's Wednesday. Is it?
The
what?
20th is,
December 20th.
When's the 19th?
Thursday. Wednesday.
19th is,
That's a Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I made it, so it's Thursday, I mean, that's okay with me.
Besides being my birthday, it's not a good
Oh,
night.
God.
Yeah.
That's
I-
my brother's birthday.
I can't.
what's on the 18th? BCA?
Right.
You don't go to BCA, do you?
No, but they're in this room.
I'm talking about
Well,
going out to
birthday,
dinner.
dinner.
Oh. I thought you meant the meeting.
You don't have to be
That's
here for
true.
BCA, do you?
Any of you guys have to be?
That's fine, no,
Great,
Angela does it.
So the 18th work?
that works for me.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll figure out the logistics, but on the 18th, okay.
So psyched up for the next one.
The Milton House is back in play because we don't
I
have
know.
Curtis.
Yeah, that's right.
So drinks without being
I'll drink-
spat and no
Drink.
spitting in the drinks.
Change my drink card.
Any,
I have one question. Do we have any ordinance on that, on camping, et cetera, of the homeless?
Not yet.
Do we think we need to?
What was behind that statement?
Everyone else does, why wouldn't
Exactly.
we?
That's, well, my point being that.
I mean, they're all moving north, they're migrating, you know, I mean, Milton's the next stop.
They usually go
That's right.
south.
That's exactly what I was, yeah.
I think there's something in the city ordinance, but it's not in the zoning ordinance. It's
Okay,
not
well,
written yet.
you know,
It would be in the
there,
city ordinance.
these camping people are gonna be, as he said, they're gonna be moving out. And we got a lot of farmland and a lot of trees. I think, I
They're
don't
gonna
know.
be camping out on Hardeman stores under their porch, man. I mean, that's,
Hey, it'll be a
Yeah.
place to go to eat.
Yeah, I think there is an urban camping section, but to be honest, I don't know what it says. I have to get.
I came across it the other day, and it was very specific. Like, you know, you couldn't, you know, they excused babies and strollers sleeping. That was one of the exceptions.
But there is something in there.
Oh, yeah.
There is, so we're covered.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
Yeah,
recall
we'd have to
exactly
get back
what
with
to
you
look
about
at.
it.
Okay, no, it was just something
Is it
that we need to
something
look
you
at.
think we
If
should
they
look
would
at?
exclude
I think
babies
so,
and
yeah,
strollers,
because,
I think they probably
I mean,
would.
What, can we-
today's
can we-
paper is,
Can we put it on the agenda for January?
yeah,
Just to look at it.
yeah,
Okay.
because today's HAC's talked about all of them in Alpharetta.
Well, it's
And
funny you mentioned that. I looked out the window of my office this afternoon, and I don't know if you know where
Downtown,
the,
right?
Huh?
You work downtown.
I work
Yeah.
downtown. I work right across the street from the Fulton County Library, which is one of the primary places for sleeping on the steps.
Can you see the streets in your office?
I'm sorry?
Aren't you high up?
Yeah, I'm 43 floors up, but that was my point. I'm looking right down on a
They look
building
like
across the
miniatures.
street. One of those people has gotten very creative, that he actually strung a hammock on the roof of one of the buildings.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So-
Kinda cold in the winter, though.
Well, it's got a 3-foot parapet wall all the way around there, and he's below that, so it's a great windbreak. He's got it figured out.
And it's sunny.
Anyway,
Quick comment.
sure.
I normally am critical of our code enforcement staff. At this point in the meeting, I would actually like to endorse the activity of them lately. They've been actively working on Birmingham Crossroads to resolve our neon issue, and thank you very much. And they also took care of the outdoor storage and the plethora of signs that were out there, so that's thanks to code enforcement of late. Thank you for that.
That reminds me, with the last-minute changes that the council elected to make in the sign ordinance, am I correct now that the people standing there with signs are allowed?
Yes.
That's what I thought. They're getting more annoying. They're
Uh,
proliferating.
We too.
Any new news on my buddy with the mud pit light?
You know what, they were supposed to come in for their electrical permit, and I don't know if they have, so I have to follow up and I'll let you know.
Electrical looks like it's done.
I know it's done, but they'll be double fined, and if it's not right, they have to take them down, so.
Good. And obviously, they haven't asked for any lighting.
Well, right, they haven't gotten, as far as I know, they haven't gotten any electrical permit. We asked them to do that a couple weeks, when we talked about it.
Right.
And the building official gave the person being the electrician, the information, and then as far as I know, I haven't heard anything. So I'm assuming that they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So I'll get back with Wade on that.
Okay.
Get back
And
to
it's
you.
fully erected and it's ready to be
I
lit
know,
up.
it's, Mark mentioned it today, but if it's incorrect, we'll have to take it down and fix it to be the way it's supposed to be, plus they'll be double charged.
Yeah.
What is this?
On Hopewell, you guys have heard me talk about the
Crossing the
Western
water.
riding lessons and the guy that's
Yeah.
continues to be offensive over there.
Right.
Well, now he's erected a telephone pole with big can lights on it
With that, they didn't have a permit.
for.
He was the one with all the signs too that time. that I
Yeah, he
came in with.
continuously gets creative about what kind of junk he can pile
Yeah.
up at the end of his driveway.
Well,
to
you ought to
attract
see it now.
attention to the.
Yes, it's Christmas decorations.
I have seen it.
I think we need to move to adjourn.
One more question though, but any update on Scottsdale?
No, I gave him the information. It sounds like he may come in for a use permit, so I gave him the information, so.
Okay.
It's a matter of Scottsdale.
Scottsdale did some significant clearing under the premise of more planting. And turns out there's gonna be, then it was then the word was, oh, by the way, we're just gonna build a ball field for my child's use. Oh, by the way, it's gonna be a nonprofit field and there's gonna be games and parking and concessions. And then the
Right, there are gonna be
concessions have said, but I think we need
And
to
then
be
he's gonna
careful
sell it
because
to the
all this
city
has sort
for
of been
60%
discovered.
More than its value.
I'm sorry?
I said he's gonna sell it to the city for 60% more than
Yeah,
its value.
exactly. I mean, just as we are learning that he hasn't necessarily been forthcoming, we need to, I think, be a little bit cautious about how,
Well, I mean, he'll have his opportunity to apply and then we can ask all the questions.
yeah. So it was kind of all happening and under the guise of some other stuff. So staff's been on top of it.
George, I have one, if I may.
Sure.
For staff, if they can talk to the city attorney. I have had a concern for a while about applicants who are partnerships, LLCs, LPs, and so on, where the applicant is listed as the LLC, and a person signs it. There's no qualification of the signature, like the one tonight. I mean, I assume David Chatham signed on behalf of the LLC, but you would never know by looking at it. And 10 years down the road, who knows?
Yeah, there ought to be
Also, as part of that, I'm concerned about the partners not being identified and not having to sign things like a disclosure statement. You know, again, somebody scribbles their signature on behalf of the LLC or the partnership, and we don't know who that is, and is it right that only the LLC
Hasn't contributed yet.
hasn't
Not the
contributed, but what about all the partners?
Officers and partners.
So,
Do that.
I assume when you said you had disclosure that you weren't talking about the LLC, you were talking about David.
Correct.
Okay.
well, but in the past, I've seen it come through as the LLC and not the members. And the third part of that is, and it was a couple of meetings ago, we had somebody come up here and I asked, you know, who signed on behalf of the LLC? And their attorney said, well, he did. And I said, well, does he have authority? I think so. And, you know, if the partners or the members are not going to be identified or they don't sign and they're giving it to somebody else to sign on behalf of the partnership, then that person, we ought to force them to show proof that they have the authority to sign on behalf of the partnership.
Power of attorney or something.
There's like a document, like a board reso type thing.
There's a power of attorney, that's
Yeah.
exactly what they need.
Yeah.
That's,
Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.